Well, welcome back to another session. I'm going to speak to the topic of why young men find themselves behind the starting line too early in life. And the best way I thought perhaps I should explain some of the causes, some of the reasons for this is perhaps to use something that I think will be easy to remember. I'm going to speak to 4 or 5 different specific things that young men do, and each of those decisions effectively causes them to sabotage their entire potential, their entire lives, their purpose. The first is something that I have shared a number of times, and that is having a girlfriend, being in a monogamous relationship, or a committed relationship with someone of the opposite sex, or someone of the same sex but in an intimate relationship, and doing that exclusively, and more importantly doing that between the age of 18 and 35. Now, as I share some of these reasons, I'd like you to keep in mind that particular age group, that period of time between 18 and 35. You will hear me repeat that a number of times. The reason for that is because I believe that that part of a man's life is perhaps the most important phase for laying the right foundations for building a great life. The first reason why most men find themselves behind the starting line in life and never catch up all through life is because we start too early with regards to relationships, committed relationships, exclusive relationships. Relationships by their nature are not inherently bad. However, one of the consequences of relationships, when you take on those relationships too early, is that most of the time you sabotage your dreams. You sacrifice your potential. You're influenced by emotions. You're influenced by feelings. You're influenced by peer pressure. Effectively, you're influenced by your significant other. You think about the we rather than the I. 18 years all the way up to 35 years is supposed to be the most selfish part of your life. Selfish simply because you're looking out for your self-interest and you're simply looking out for your potential. You have a vision of who you would like to become, and you have to be focused on getting through all the obstacles that will stop you from getting to that potential. Being self-centered, selfish, and placing your self-interest first and as priority is something I recommend. Not in a very selfish way, I have to say, but recognizing that 95% of your time should be focused on your career, your purpose, your dreams, your goals, creating wealth, building a future. 5% of your time should be spent on relationships. I recommend have a few plates spinning so that you are never in a committed relationship between 18 and 30, preferably between 18 and 35. The reason most men have themselves set back as a result of this decision is primarily because of the investment of 2 things, time and money. Now, every one of us, we have the same 24 hours every single day. The rich man, the poor man, the beggar, the thief, the wealthy man, we get the same equality in time. Time becomes our first currency that we have, and we use as a means of exchanging for anything we wish. I'm not going to focus on time because it's quite hard to explain generally how much time each person spends in a committed relationship. Let me focus on the cost, the monetary cost, which I think is significant. On the average, most men spend about £40 per week, when they are in committed relationships. Assuming that there are 50 weeks in a year, that is a significant sum of money. But let's just say, for the sake of making a simple process, rather than £40, let's call it £50, and we assume that the extra £10 will account for all the additional miscellaneous costs that occur. Now, obviously, I'm setting aside birthday gifts and Valentine's and important dates that both of you want to celebrate. I'm talking about simply going out for dates, going out to see a movie. £50 per week. That equates to £200 every single month. A significant sum. Now, £200 per month, if you were simply to have that money deposited and saved in an account for that 18-year period, at the end of the 18-year period, recognizing that you would have made 216 monthly payments, you would have accrued £43,000. Now, let that just sink in. The cost of having a girlfriend, just for dates, nothing expensive, no birthdays, no Valentine's Days, no Christmas gifts, no special occasions. The basic cost over an 18-year period is £43,000. If you, rather than save that money, you were smart enough to take that £200 per month and you invested that in a low-cost index fund, say the Vanguard S&P 500, and you accrued interest and you made 10% every year, the value of the money you would have saved at the end of the 18-year period, so by age 35, if you took all the money you were paying at £200 per month from age 18 all the way up to age 35, you would have accrued £116,500. £43,000 of that would have been what would have been yours to keep in a savings account. So therefore, approximately £93,000 is what you've accrued simply by reinvesting the interest you've earned every single year. £200 per month across 18 years, which is equivalent to 216 monthly payments, would translate to 116,500, of which 73,000 is simply money working for you. Numbers never lie, and I think it's easy for most men to visually get things in perspective when they realize that every day you're spending a part of your future. Now, the second reason why most men fail to achieve their dreams, find themselves behind the starting line, never get to the finish line in life, leave a life not worthy of emulation or admiration, is because they have a child too early, having a child out of wedlock, or having children too early. Obviously, this goes hand in hand with the first. In order to be in a mono relationship or committed relationship, there are costs. If for some reason you get married too early, it's the same as being in a mono relationship. It comes with costs. If you take that further and have a child too early, you've guaranteed that you're going to have a mediocre life, all things remaining equal. Now, I'm speaking on the general. I know there are exceptions to my statement. There are people who have kids at 18 and who've made a great life for themselves. But if you had a child at 18, and just to put the same mathematical calculation so you can visualize what this means. Let's say over your 18-year period, between 18 and 35, your average salary annually would be 36,000, which is the average salary in the United Kingdom. 36,000, if you have one child, you would have to pay 10% of what you earn as gross income, which would be £3,600 annually, or £300 per month. By having a child at 18, you're making payments every single month to the tune of £300 per month across 216 months, or 18 years. That would amount to £65,000 over an 18-year period. Again, a significant amount of money. If, on the other hand, you did the same thing as before, where you said, rather than have this money saved, assuming you decided to be wise and discerning and you didn't have a child, and you were careful not to have one, and each month you deposited £300 in a savings account, by age 35, you would have £65,000 in your bank account. If you chose to invest the same amount of money in a low-cost index fund, and that accrued at 10% annually, the £65,000 will grow to £175,000, meaning that the money you've earned on just interest, money working for you, will be £110,000. Let me put this in a different way. You get yourself a golden goose. The golden goose lays eggs. The eggs are hatched. They lay more eggs. Your original golden goose still stays, but all of the interests and offsprings it creates would accrue to the tune of £110,000. So £300 every month across 18 years. If that was invested, you would have £175,000. Now, when you take the first statement I made about being in a committed relationship, I said you would have accrued £116,500 by age 35. If you add the second, which is having a child, which would accrue to you £175,000, if you invested that money and didn't have a child, this means that by age 35, just by making those two important decisions, you would have roughly £290,000 in investments. By making two important decisions, not to be in a committed relationship between 18 and 35, and certainly not to be married, and number two, not to have children out of wedlock, and certainly do not have kids between 18 and 35. Now, number three is living outside of your means. We do not do a good job, I think, in my opinion, of teaching young people the importance of having a sound financial education and being financially intelligent. And so for many people, we do not realize that the important thing to always bear in mind is that you should not live within or outside of your means. Rather, you should live within your means. Living outside of your means creates a very, very, very difficult obstacle that some people do not get out of for decades. It's not unusual for the average young man to have credit card debts up to about £2,000. As a matter of fact, the average young person has credit card debts of about £2,000. The £2,000 is not a significant sum, except for the following. If you had a credit card account and you were overdrawn by £2,000, and this is where the lack of financial education is made evident, most people pay the minimum payments every single month. On a credit card that has an 18% APR, it would take you, if you paid just the minimum payment, would take you 30 years to pay down that balance of £2,000. The interesting part of that conversation is, at the end of the 30 years, you would have paid approximately £5,000 for a £2,000 loan. So you've paid a significant amount more than you originally borrowed, which is part of the reason why I always say to young people, as much as you can, avoid credit cards. Now let me emphasize how serious but misunderstood this is. If you walked into the bank and you asked the bank to loan you money to buy a house, most banks will turn you down, although the average interest for a mortgage is about 4%. However, if you go to a credit card company and you ask for credit, they will happily give you a credit facility up to £10,000 with the interest rates at more than 18%, in some cases 25% APR. The point being that you do not qualify for a mortgage or a loan at 4% yet. The credit card companies are happy to loan you money at 18% because they recognize that you will become a perpetual slave working for them. And they understand most people do not realize that if you make minimum payments, you will always be in servitude to the company. 30 years to pay off £2,000 if all you made was the minimum payment. So 3 things. Number 1, don't be in a mono relationship too early, between 18 and 35. And certainly, do not get married. Number 2, and by being married, I'm saying before 35. Number 2, do not have kids outside of wedlock. Do not have kids between 18 and 35. And certainly do not have kids before 18. And the number 3, avoid credit cards. Live within your means. Live within your means. Discipline yourself to avoid debt or any form of loan, no matter how attractive the proposition is. And number 4 deals with something I dealt with previously in yesterday's session, which is dating single mothers. Single mothers do a great job. And this is not a criticism about single mothers per se. This is simply about understanding as a young man the fact that if I have recommended to you that you should avoid having a child between 18 and 35, or at least avoid having a child until you're 35, in the same way, the last thing I would want you to do is become a surrogate father or stepfather to someone else's children between the same age and timeline. Above 35, you are, in my eyes, you're old enough to make your decisions yourself. Before 35, avoid dating single mothers for a number of reasons. If you date a single mother, you're by default are being auditioned for the role of father. Women say that they do not want a man in their children's lives, but I know from experience and observing people who have had kids out of wedlock, women in this particular case, I've said it's a very hard job. And so most single mothers genuinely want help in the long run. Between 18 and 35, you should be focused on your purpose, your dreams, your goals, your ambitions, creating wealth, educating yourself, becoming your best self. So avoid dating single mothers. The cost of dating single mothers is very similar to the cost of being in a normal relationship. I gave you the same numbers. Having a girlfriend between 18 and 35 on average will cost you about £200 per month. Across 18 years, that's £43,000 if that money was invested instead of spent, if you earn 10% return annually on that money, that 43,000 will grow to 116,500. So let's just go back from the top. 4 items I've referred to. Number 1, avoid being in a mono relationship or being married between 18 and 35. If the opportunity cost of that, if the money spent or that would have been spent is invested, that will become 116,500. Number 2, avoid having children or having multiple children, certainly, until 35. The average cost over that entire period, if you had 1 child, is £300 per month. Across 18 years, would have been 65,000 saved if you had saved that money rather than committed the crime or rather than made the mistake of having a child. If you invested that £300 per month and monthly at a 10% annual rate, that money will become £175,000. It would grow from £65,000 to £175,000. Number 3, avoid credit cards. You borrow £2,000, takes you 30 years to pay that back. So that means you have a dead weight cost of almost £5,000. If you add the 3 to number 4, which is avoid dating single mothers, because it comes with a cost similar to being in a relationship, which is £200 per month, £4,000 to £3,000 over an 18-year period, £116,500 if invested. What that means, you have 175 plus 116 plus 116 plus 5,000. Now that brings you to a number very, very comparable. If I just did the numbers in my head quickly, 116 times 2 is 230 plus 175 is almost £400,000. £400,000 would have been invested and waiting for you by age 35. So you automatically, by avoiding these 4 simple mistakes, you're worth, or you would have been worth, almost £500,000 by age 35. Now that £500,000 is in cash. At 35, you could have easily taken that £400,000 and used it as a deposit for properties if you were looking to secure your wealth or save your wealth. So you could easily have bought at £100,000 across, say £40,000 per deposit is 10 properties. Assuming you were buying a property worth roughly about £400,000, or let's call it £300,000 each, you would have had a portfolio of roughly about £3 million. If you found the right tenants to pay down that payment for you over a 30-year period or a 20-year period, at 35 you have a property portfolio worth about £3 million. You have £400,000 of equity in the portfolio. You have tenants paying down the interest and principal on your behalf over a 25-year period, which would mean that by the time you go from 35 to 55, at your 55th birthday, you have £3 million in hard cash, in assets. Each of those assets will be yielding roughly about 5% of a return to you. 3 million in present terms, 3 million returning 5%, just 5%, not 10, not 15, not 7, just 5. That would mean that you will be making about 100, if you think about it, 3 million at 10% is 300,000 annually. 3 million at 5% is 150,000 pounds annually. So you're making 150,000 pounds of free cash flow from your properties. You keep the assets, but every single year, the properties give you 150,000 pounds. Now it goes without saying that That means your family, when you start the family, those who look up to you will be secure for life. If you can maintain those properties carefully and continue to work to accrue more wealth from your main source of earnings, and you have money working for you and you working for money. 4 simple ways to avoid sabotaging yourself. Now the 5th, which I think perhaps in my opinion goes without saying, and that is refusing to invest in your education. Now I know most people think of formal education as the only way to learn. I learned formally, but also I learned through the art of personal development. And one of the mistakes most young men make is failing to reinvest in themselves. I have always said about 10% of what you earn between 18 and 35 and beyond should be reinvested in yourself, in your human capital, in books, mentors, education programs, seminars, teachers. And the reason for that is simply to allow your mind to expand so you can think bigger, you can think further, you can think with clarity. You may not have gone to college, you may not have gone to university. That does not mean you're not intelligent. But intelligence has to be stress tested. And one of the simple ways is through personal and professional development. So it's important for you to reinvest 10% of your earnings every single month back in yourself. As a goal, and this is a goal that I think is doable by most young people, between the age 18 and 35, I expect you to have read about 1,000 books. Now before you think that that is too much, that amounts to roughly about 1 book per week. And across the whole year, on 12 other weeks, you try to read 1.5 books. That will get you to 1,000 books in 18 years. By doing that, what you've done is you position yourself in such a way that you can learn from other people. Now, there are 2 ways of learning. I prefer what I call the accelerated path to learning, which is learning from other people's experiences, learning from mentors, inspirations, teachers. We call that OPE. The second way is a slower way, which is learning through your mistakes, learning from yourself. We call that personal experiences. It's more expensive, it's slower, it's time consuming, and sometimes the mistakes that you make are so huge and significant that it takes you years to get yourself back on track. So invest in yourself. Take 10% of all you earn and put it back in your mind. It's the one part of you that cannot be taxed, your earning ability. The land can be taxed, the house you earn and own can be taxed, your salary is taxed, but the wisdom you accumulate in your mind is yours to keep. From that wisdom, you can create opportunities for more wealth, for investments, for opportunities with collaboration with people, and for avoiding mistakes. Now, I think in my experience, I could potentially say that the value of the money I've spent in my education is at least worth about £400,000. I think that is too small. I hope that I can increase that over time. I have been paid back many times over. My world is my mind. My world is not out there. My assets are in my head. I try to release and transfer those assets so they become tangible. The quality of what I produce in tangible form depends on the quality of my mind. So here are 5 simple reasons why most men underperform, and fail to reach their true potential. Now, I hope that has been